early, and the pace remarkably fast for this race, which normally starts fairly sedately because of its sheer length. But at one time they actually had a lead, these five, no less than 17 minutes and 40 seconds. But as you see, it's come rapidly down. They slowed a little going over the big pass, the Turchino Pass, which is about 1,700 feet above sea level. And in the past, by the way, when the weather's been bad, that's been a snow-covered mountain, as I'm sure Sean Kelly might recall. I'll get to you in a moment, Sean, about that. But just to let you know that these five are now a little more than 4 minutes away from being caught by the peloton. They're being reeled in, but they've had a great run for their money. Well, Sean, it's a new season for Milan-San Remo, and normally, of course, this race is the start of the World Cup, as it has been ever since 1989, when the World Cup began. You'll remember that year very, very well. But here we are, and we now have to call it round 3 of the new Pro Tour.
Yes, well, Milan-San Remo, of course, one of the biggest races in Italy, and, you know, the first big classic of the season. So in Italy, it's, you know, so much of following down here. It's a magnificent race.
We'll hear more from you, Sean, after this. To our coverage of Milan-San Remo. Glad to have this race back on Eurosport after a few years' absence. This is the 96th edition. This race nearing its centenary, actually. It's been run by the Italian sports newspaper Gazzetta dello Sport ever since 1907, and despite 2 world wars, it's only actually missed 3 years. That was 1916 during the First World War, and 44 and 45 during the Second World War. Eddie Merckx holds the record number of victories. The great Eddie Merckx won it 7 times in the 60s, and the Italian hero way back in the teens and 20s, Girardengo, he won it on 6 occasions. I mentioned Eric Zabel's 4 wins, which really should have been 5 last year. That was a terrible mistake that Eric Zabel made on the Via Roma in San Remo 12 months ago. Let's hope he gets in that situation again. He doesn't make the same mistake. I have to record, though, that there has been one British win. I'm sure followers of British cycling will well remember, if you're a little older, that is, that Tommy Simpson won this race way back in 1964 with what was then, incidentally, the race record speed of 43.4 kilometres an hour. Well, let me tell you that after 5 hours of racing, the average speed was 39.2, but that will go up a little bit now that the riders are in the closing stages and the heat is beginning to come on. And once these 5 have been reeled in, I'm sure that we're going to see attacks fast and furious. That's usually the pattern, as Sean Kelly must know very well. I think we're going to just have a little look, Sean, before we talk more about the tactics in the closing stages, as these 5 are being reeled in a little. I think we're going to be able to have a little look at some statistics about past winners coming up in just a few seconds' time. I mentioned the great Eddie Merckx, who won it on 7 occasions. You'll see him on the top of the list. Well, in fact, the caption we've got is just recent winners. There you see Eric Zabel's 4 wins, a couple in 97 and 98, then again in 2000, 2001. Cipollini, Bettini, Freire last year, when he just managed to get his wheel ahead of Eric Zabel's right on the line. And of course, Zabel, Cipollini, Bettini and Freire, the last 4 men to win it, are all in this field. Yes, Mario Cipollini is just coming up to his 38th birthday, by the way, in another week or 2, but he's still going strong. He's not the oldest man in the race, though. That's Konichev, the Russian former silver medalist in the World Road Race Championship. Sean, you remember him. He's 39 years of age now. But as we look at those past winners, some great names there, Sean. And of course, a little while further back still, you won this race on 2 occasions. We've got to place that on record, and I think we might just see Ireland represented when we go to our next caption of countries. Yes, there they are, Ireland too. That's you, fella. Well, of course, the Italians, it's their race, and not surprisingly, they have won it by far the greatest number of times. But Belgium, thanks to Eddie Merckx's 7 wins, well, they've had 20, as you see. And there on the bottom, England, well, that's the Tommy Simpson victory that I mentioned way back in 1964. But it's actually surprising, 2, 4, 6, 8, only 9 different nations have provided winners since this race began in 1907. Now, Sean, these 5, they set off at only 33 kilometres. At one stage they had almost 17 minutes. This gap is rapidly coming down. Let's just remind our viewers who they are, and then I'll ask you to comment on how you think this race is going to pan out. There's Jimmy Casper riding for the Cofidis team. Jimmy's normally a sprinter, but he's found himself in this break. Inaki Isas Flores for Euskaltel. He hasn't raced so far this year. This is his first outing, by the way. Daniel Ricci for the Lampre team. He's also making his 2005 debut. Mauro Santambrogio for the little Swiss team LPR. He had a win, by the way, in the Giro del Lago Maggiore just a couple of weeks ago. And Filippo Simeone, the 33-year-old who rides for the Domina Vacanze team, who managed a win last year in the stage of the Tour of Austria, but nothing else of great account since then. They're not going to last, clearly, Sean. Is it the objective of the peloton, do you think, to close this breakdown quickly? We've still got a way to go, or might they just let them hang out there to dry for a little bit longer yet?
No, I don't think they will even hang out there too long. This sort of race, everybody is so nervous, the first big classic of the season, and especially the Italians, they are so nervous in this race. It's really crazy, and the bunch, they never allow this group to take a huge advantage. Sometimes we've seen, groups get away and maybe take 25 minutes plus, but this year there was a number of teams right in the front there who have riders capable of winning, so they control the situation, and it's coming back much quicker than I think they would have expected to. And now we're going into this final. We see them going through the feeding station just a few minutes ago in Seriale. So we're coming to the the decisive point of the race. We're going on to the capos, as they call them, on the coast, not too far up the road now. So everybody in the bunch will want to be the front of the speed. Will just go up, and it will be just a charge from here all the way up the capas onto the Cipressa and then to the Poggio, and that's where the race will pan out. And it's definitely going to be a winner out of the bunches. These guys are really they're almost cooked at the moment.
The capos, those little climbs which don't look so great in themselves, but when you've already done about 250, 260k, it makes a huge difference, doesn't it, to how your legs feel when you do those little hills in the closing stages.
That's what Milan was about. The race is not really that difficult. Even the Cipressa and the Poggio, they're not major big climbs like the professionals have to do in some of the races, but it's just the distance and the sheer speed when you get to that point of the race. They go so fast up those climbs. It's difficult to stay up there, and especially for the sprinters to stay up in the first 20 or 30, because you have to stay up in the first 30 on the Cipressa, for example, because the descent is so dangerous and a lot of splits in the group, and to come back you have to make the effort, and then you hit the Poggio, so you have to stay up there really to the front of the bunch, and the speed is the one that makes the rider suffer after such a distance, of course, because they've been on the road now since 9 o'clock Central European time.
You mentioned the descent off the Cipressa, but the last descent off the Poggio, some reckon that's even more dangerous, and I can recall when you went away and you made your bid for your second victory, you really sort of, you abandoned caution completely on those treacherous descents, and you, if I may put it this way, you got away with it, pal, but you really took some terrible risks on those tricky descents.
Yes, well, in the descent of the Poggio, everybody takes risks when you're going there in the for the win, and I certainly that year I took unbelievable risks, but the situation, Argentine was away, he went over the top with about 13-14 seconds on advantage, and I said I'd leave the group I was with because there was quite a few sprinters, and my sprint at that time wasn't as good as it had been in the early part of my career, so I was thinking about second place. Was as I did the descent of the Poggio, I see that Argentine was I was catching up, so I just pushed it a bit more and got to him in the last kilometre, but you have to take the risk when you're going for the victory in this race, and the leading group will definitely be on the limit going down this one.
I'll bet they will. Well, most wins per rider. I mentioned Max and Girardengo, and look at those other names. I mentioned Eric Zabel, Gino Bartali, the great Italian who won the Tour de France either side of the Second World War. Bartali won this great classic race on 4 occasions. Roger de Vlaming, who of course also made a big name for himself in the world of cyclocross and Paris-Roubaix. Roger de Vlaming managed to win this on 3 occasions. The great Fausto Coppi, who was Bartali's great rival, of course, in Italian cycling, particularly just after the Second World War. The great Fausto Coppi also managed to win this race on 3 occasions. What great names on that list. Well, And there's Eric Zabel's 4 victories coming in two pairs of 2. Look at that. And he could have had that 5th last year. Eddie Merckx, well, in 11 seasons in total, winning it 7 times out of 11 attempts. That's pretty good by any stretch of the imagination, isn't it, hey? But then Eddie Merckx was the cannibal, that's what they called him, because he liked to eat up everybody, the opposition and the race, every time that he rode. Well, what a great guy he was. And it was nice to see Eddie Merckx looking so fit and somewhat more slimline at the Tour de France last year. He seems to have lost some of the weight which he put on after he retired from cycling. Well, it's saying here, look, Sean, only 2 minutes now between these 5 and the peloton, so this is really coming down very, very quickly. And once these guys do get caught, then I'm sure we're going to see the attacks coming thick and fast as we get ever closer to the 2 final climbs that most people think of as the closing stages of this great race, Milan-San Remo, the Cipressa and the Poggio. Actually, Sean, there was some talk which emanated from the organisers of the race that because we've been seeing a little bit too much in the view of the organisers of the sprinters contesting a sprint finish for this race, that they were even considering finding another climb, plenty of them just off this main coast road that they could put in by way of a diversion, that they were actually considering putting in another climb somewhere between the Cipressa and the Poggio in an attempt to try to tempt the Bettinis, the solo guys, to go away and go for the lone win and not to have a grandstand sprint on the Via Roma. What's your thought about that?
Well, that's quite true. They were talking about that, and I think the organisers, Pataki, he's so fast in the sprint, and the climbs are a little bit difficult for him, and I think that was the reason they did not put it in, because Pataki comes from not someplace in this area, so for him it wouldn't be a good thing to throw in another climb, because to get to the finish it's going to be a little bit difficult. But on the form he's in, I think he's very capable of doing it today, so I would say that's the reason. And it's not the first time Italian organisers have done that, made the race a bit easy, because it suits an Italian rider.
But there will be the other Italian people out there who'll say, well, the days of Fausto Coppi and Gino Bartali, when these guys went away and won stages of the Tour de France by 15 and 20 minutes, those are the great days. Let's bring back some of those. Are you of that school or not?
Well, I don't think the Italians are not going to worry if Pataki wins today. They're not going to say, the race, it could have been a bit more difficult, he mightn't have won. If you're an Italian and you can win the Milan-San Remo, well, then your season's made. You're the gods in Italy for the rest of this season. So I don't see any problem in that, and I don't know would it break up the bunch that much unless they get a climb which is 7 or 8 k's to break it up. There's still going to be 100 plus riders going to the finish, and maybe the sprinter like Pataki might put him in a bit of difficulty, but it depends on where you push it as well. If it's a good bit out from the present Poggio, well, then riders have a chance to come back again. They would have to put it very close to finish, to cause any upset to the riders like a Pataki the way he's going at this moment.
Well, here we see our 5 leaders still ploughing on, and there's the Cofidis jersey of Jimmy Casper, Stuart O'Grady's teammate, of course, and Stuart was right up there in 3rd place on the Via Roma 12 months ago, so Stuart presumably is being able to have a comparatively comfortable ride in the confines of the bunch here with his teammate Jimmy Casper out in front. Might that just make the difference? Stuart showed that he's still got a lot of speed in his legs. Of course, he took to the track at the Olympics last year, and he got a gold medal in the Madison, so Stewie's certainly got the legs.
Yes, well, I think he's proved already he can get up there on those sprints. To win against a Pataki or against a Tom Bone, I don't think he's capable of doing that, but who knows what will happen on the Poggio. Maybe a group can get away, and if that happened, well, then it would be a perfect position for O'Grady to be in a smaller group. But there's a lot of other favourites there as well, and I think talking about Eric Zabel last year, I think he lost the race last year because when he overtook Pataki in the sprint, he thought he had the race won, and that's when he started putting up his hands, and he was stolen from under his arm by Ferreira. But I think when you get by to Pataki in a sprint, I think that's where Zabel lost the concentration last year.
Well, if he is in that position this year, my money is on him not making the same mistake 2 years running, that's for sure.
He'll not put up his hands at all.
I don't think he will. interesting to see quite a few of the Lamprey jerseys out towards the front of the peloton here. The Lamprey boys trying to close it down. They've no Cunego, they've no Simone here today, by the way. The Lamprey boys, of course, Cunego and Simone, along with a lot of the former Seiko team from last year, have joined up with some of the more established Lamprey riders to form this new Lamprey Cafita team this year. So we'll have to see what they can do. And there you've got a very good view of Jimmy Casper, who you don't often see Jimmy in a break like this. Certainly when he came to the fore as a young pro a few years ago, he was a very, very good little sprinter, but he didn't develop into the super sprinter that a lot of the French hoped that he might do. So here he is. This is the new Jimmy Casper going on a long lone break, and it has been on a long lone break. They went away at 33 kilometres of the race, and we're coming down rapidly towards around 50 to go now. We'll take a short break. Join us for more after this.
Some of the live highlights.
Lovely view we've got of the Mediterranean seaboard here as this great race, Milan-San Remo, continues its run along the northern shore. And this, the Italian Riviera, which in the summertime, of course, is absolutely jam-packed full of the sun worshippers. Not too many there today, although it has to be said, this is actually a nice day. The weather has been pretty good virtually all day since they left Milan early this morning. There's been a very slight tailwind all the way, which of course has helped them. They are, not surprisingly because of that, a little bit ahead of schedule. But these five boys are going to be reeled in. Here we see the peloton really making great inroads now into this gap, which, just to remind you in case you've just turned on, was at one stage no less than 17 minutes and 40 seconds. And well, there's a lot of different teams working here. I can see one or two of the Fassa Bortolos doing the work. The Lamprey boys are also working in there quite hard. And
Liquigas.
That's one of the Liquigas riders.
Expected. It looks like. And of course, the Liquigas, of course, the team of Mario. He said, I see in the Italian newspaper, he said that, yes, I can win another Milan-San Remo.
Well, that looked a little bit like Magnus Backstedt to me, who is now with Mario Cipollini. Well, Cipollini, he's still a young 37, not quite 38 years of age.
Well, on his form in Torino Adriatico, he seemed to be up there on the sprints, and who knows what he could pull out of the bag, as they say. But I think, you know, the Cipressa and Poggio in the end, I think it's going to be a little bit too difficult for him to stay up there in contention.
And just look at the view there of the peloton en masse as they wend their way further along the coastline. This race, definitely a race of two halves. I know that's a cliche, but it really is, because more or less exactly halfway is where they come from the countryside down to the Riviera, and from there on in it is coastline all the way. Alessandro Petacchi, well, we've talked about him and Oscar Freire quite a lot already, and just look at the number of wins that Petacchi has had already this season. It has been a real bumper bundle for this fella. That's amazing. We're only in the middle of March and he's had 11 victories to his name. That's quite astonishing for anybody. 31 years of age, Petacchi. He started out with a string of wins in Andalusia and of course the Comunitat Valencia, which he actually won overall, by the way, thanks to a couple of stage victories there. He won the opening stage of Tirreno Adriatico. He won two further stages, finished second on the general classification. It's been a marvellous start to the season for Petacchi, and that's why he and Oscar Freire, who also has had terrific form, is deemed to be the favourite for this race here today. Normally, as I say, the opening race of the World Cup season, but now with the new improved Pro Tour, this is event number 3 after Paris-Nice and of course the Tirreno Adriatico. As far as teams are concerned, well, Fassa Bortolo, not too surprisingly, of course, are the winningest team. That's a very American expression, I know. As you see, they've had 16, 11 of those coming from the aforementioned Alessandro, and the Davitamon Lotto team in second place with 13. CSC, thanks mainly to their sprinters. They have had quite a few wins as well. It really has been a sprinters' year so far, Sean. We've not seen any lone epics of any huge proportions, have we? The sprinters so far have had quite a field day in this early part of 2005.
Yes, well, certainly this till now the season, the races have been relatively short, so the sprinters, it's a feast day for them in the first couple of weeks of the season. Of course, the early part of the season, the races are not very hilly either because of weather conditions. They can't go the major high climbs, so a perfect time for the sprinters to notch up stage victories.
Number 1, Oscar Freire. By the way, he's not wearing his World Championship jersey, as of course he is entitled to wear, but the jersey that he's got on is actually the Pro Tour leadership jersey, because this is a Pro Tour event, one of the 27 events on the cards this season that comprise the new Pro Tour. So that is the jersey that you see Oscar Freire wearing at the moment. Bobby Julich was the first to claim leadership when he won Paris-Nice, but of course no sooner had Paris-Nice finished than Tirreno Adriatico finished, and Bobby Julich had to lend the jersey, dare we say, I don't know, to Oscar Freire. We shall see. We don't have Bobby Julich here in Milan San Remo today though, but what credit to the American who's had one or two in different years for coming through and at the age of 33 pinching Paris-Nice. Tremendous victory, Sean.
Yes, well, he's been there last year. He was riding very, very strong. He got a new lease of life when he moved over to CSC. Of course, some years ago when he finished third on the tour, we were talking about him of a potential tour win. I think that was putting him a bit high on the podium, but a race like Paris-Nice, it was always within his reach, but he went through a few bad years, and he's back the past 2 years, and I think deserved certainly to win the Paris-Nice, because he's been in very good shape right since the beginning of the season.
And Oscar Freire, of course, you don't see Oscar Freire winning too many stage races. He wins stages within races, but doesn't often come out on top overall. That was quite a boost for the Spaniard, wasn't it?
Yes, and that's where Freire, of course, took over the jersey, as we just spoke about there, of Pro Tour, because he won 3 stages, where Bobby Julich did not win any stage in Paris-Nice. So for a stage victory, of course, there was 1 point, and he leads that classement by 3 points from Bobby Julich.
Well, just look at this, 36 seconds now only between the 5 leaders. They've been out there for just about 200 kilometres. They went away at 33, and I think we've covered just about 233, well, a little bit more than that. And there you see the time of this race already over 6 hours. This really is a tremendously long race. And Sean, you said earlier that one of the reasons why the sprinters have had such a field day so far was because of the shorter stages, and of course 1 or 2 of the Paris-Nice stages were shortened because of the weather. But how come then that in recent years this particular race has been the confine of the sprinters when it's such an enormously long race?
Well, the sprinters, of course, they can get over the longer distance, but I think it's the more difficult terrain makes it really difficult. And this race, I think the last years, the sprinters in the last 10 years, certainly the sprinters have improved. They seem to be climbing that much better than they were 15 years ago, and that's why we're seeing more sprinters getting through here. And of course, all the riders now in the professional ranks for the past 10-15 years, they're all at a better standard of fitness, so we see a bigger bunch getting to the final of Milan San Remo, and a bunch maybe of 30 or 40 riders coming over the top of the podium. I think if you go back 20 years ago, I think the bunch would be much more broken up.
Well, it looks as though this peloton has all but reeled them in. I think there's 1 rider of the 5 has already slipped off the back of the other 4 and is about to be swept up, but the other 4 themselves, I don't think they're going to last very much longer now, as the race continues its way along the Italian Riviera, ever nearer to San Remo, this town which basks in the lovely sunshine of the Mediterranean summer, and has been a great crowd puller for many years. And there you see one of those riders. In fact, I'm just wondering whether that's a Saunier Duval jersey out front, Sean, that's just gone away from the main peloton.
Yes, he actually attacked in the tunnel there in between the motorbikes. We just see him a little time ago.
Well, I wonder who that is. We don't quite know who it is yet. Of course, Saunier Duval have the great old man himself, Andrea Tafi, in their team. Andrea's all of 38 years of age now. A number of World Cup victories to Andrea's names, including that one down in Kent a few years ago. when one of the World Cup races was held in Britain. Well, Britain, of course, staged the World Cup in various parts of Britain, in Newcastle, in Brighton, down in the Medway area, and of course the Leeds Classic for a number of years. And I did read in the press that the organisers, the UCI people who look into these things, hadn't ruled out particularly one of the new Pro Tour events being a British event in the next year or 2 or 3. We shall see. Oh, just waiting to try to identify that yellow jersey. It's obviously a Saunier Duval rider. I'm not sure whether it is Andrea Taffy.
Yes.
You think it is?
Yes. It's the Taffy.
The old man himself having a go. He's not quite the oldest man in the race. As I said, Dmitry Konishev, who rides for that Swiss team LPR, who started only 6 riders, by the way, today. It is Taffy, that's been confirmed now. Konishev is 39. Andrea's a mere stripling of 38, and Mario Cipollini's just coming up to 38. But here's Andrea Taffy, number 221. Yep, it is indeed he. Well, I don't think he'll last, but this is typical Taffy stuff, of course, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is, and you know, we've seen him do this so many times in races. As we see our leaders here, we're down to 4 at the moment. Jimmy Casper has disappeared from that breakaway, but Taffy's probably just taking a little advantage before they get to the capos.
Most classifications, Cipollini, I'm not quite sure, classifications in what? I didn't get any advance warning about this one, but, well, you can see a lot of Italians up there, can't you? Cipollini, Taffy, Bortolami, and Eric Zabel, who's won this race on 4 occasions. Mario Cipollini only ever won it a mere once, but that was a famous victory for Mario Cipollini after a lot of the Italian press had written him off the year before. He came back and promptly won it when it was the opening event of the World Cup 2 or 3 years ago. Andrea Taffy, well, there's his name right up there with Cipollini, and he's chasing those 4. In fact, he's probably up with them now. When we get another shot of the breakaways, we might be able to just take a check. Oh no, there he is, he's coming back again. So it didn't last very long.
Well, it's so difficult to get out of the group at this point because you know, they're going along at a very, very fast rate, because they're coming into the point of the race where you have to be up in front, and we see, you know, for the leaders here is just over at the moment. They're just about to be swallowed up. We see the Royals having a chat there on the front, and it's a pity they get caught just before the capos, because if they just got over the capos, well then they'd have a chance maybe of staying, you know, staying there, get to the suppressor. But now I think they're really going to suffer to stay in contention, even to stay in the bunch.
That's the heartbreaking thing, isn't it, when you've been making a name for yourself out front, Sean, especially when you've been out for 200 kilometres, as those 4 or 5 have, in fact. Your legs just won't let you stay up with the increased pace from the peloton, and often we find guys like that finishing 15, 20 minutes or more down, even though they've maybe only been caught in the last 30 or 40k.
Well, yes, it's the chance, you know, the teams would have a chat about that and say, you know, they say, well, if there's groups going away, you know, these riders would be designed, or they would be just told to, you know, have a go at that group, and in case it might stay away, you never know. But like how many years ago since one of these échappées bidon, as they call it in French, stay away? I think it was Marc Gomez was the first winner, or the last winner, sorry, in 1982. I think that was the real breakaway that he won from. So it's a long, long time ago since a break had succeeded.
Well, maybe that was the thinking behind those people amongst the organisers who considered that it might be worthwhile putting an extra climb in between the Cipresa and the Poggio. Well, the balloon's going up in great numbers, and I'm sure that the balloons will be going up in more ways than one when these riders get to these closing little climbs. We've talked about them a little bit. They're not in themselves huge, but when you've done so much of a distance of this race, they appear, in the legs anyway, to be really big, big mountains. And the Cipresa particularly can be quite nasty if your legs are just beginning to burn a little. This road twisting around, never very far away from the Mediterranean Sea, which is just over to your left, just out of camera. That's how close they are to the Mediterranean. And yet this road, despite the fact that it's very close to the sea itself, is remarkably lumpy. We'll take another short commercial break. Stay with us for further action from this great race, Milan-San Remo. Of this great race, Milan San Remo, the 96th edition of this huge classic in northern Italy. 294 kilometres, 183 miles, 25 teams of 8. They didn't all start with 8 teams. Incidentally, one or two notable absentees who were down to ride are Davitamon Lotto's ace sprinter Robbie McEwen, who didn't start complaining of a sore throat, and a similar affection befalling George Hincapie for the Discovery Channel. George, of course, who was in the closing stages of the race last year, in with a shout, although his teammate Max van Heeswijk, who doesn't appear today, he actually beat into the line. Max was 5th, and I thought they might have put Max down to ride today. And what I gleaned pre-race was that the Discovery Channel, formerly the US Postal Service team, of course, were now putting all their hopes in one of their new young riders, the young Belgian Stijn de Volder, who apparently has a tidy little sprint at the end. So in the absence of Van Heeswijk and George Hincapie, they're going to be working for him. And working for him includes, of course, Britain's own Roger Hammond, who signed a contract with the Discovery Channel last winter, of course, and has already made 1 or 2 appearances in his new colours already. So Roger in there somewhere fighting it out for his new team, the Discovery Channel. And if you see a Discovery Channel jersey and you see the number 82, well, that's the young Stijn de Volder, of whom they have great hopes. Yes, but we've mentioned some of the bigger names than Stijn de Volder. No disrespect to the youngster, but we've talked about a lot of the bigger names. You see it coming down to a grandstand sprint between those guys that we mentioned earlier.
Yes,
Sean.
well, I think the likes of de Volder, I think experience is a big thing here in this race, to know exactly where to be at the moments, and that's very important. I think a rider without the experience in the race, de Volder may not have the experience, but if you look down to the list of favourites, the big ones, I suppose, as we said, Freire, Pataki, and then you go down to Bone, and Valverde, of course, who was riding very well in Paris-Nice, can, climb very well, quite fast in the sprint. He's one, we're just wondering what will he do in this race, because it's his first time taking part. And then Zabel, and Bettini, have, Cipollini, of course, Decker, O'Grady, as we mentioned, Kirchen, Hondo, Rebellin, Vinogradov, of course. He's a rider, he's not going to wait for the sprint. If he has anything in the legs on the Poggio, he's going to have a go and try and get away. And if he does get away on the descent, we see him in the Paris-Nice once again in the final stage. The way he descended into Nice, he can descend very well, so he would be a dangerous one if he could put out a gap of 10 or 15 seconds on the Poggio.
You mentioned Alessandro Valverde. He got strong as the race went on in Paris. In fact, he won the last stage, didn't he? Former runner-up in the World Championship, Valverde. He hasn't actually been mentioned amongst all the favourites who've been talked about, in the press and so on. Not many people have actually said the name Valverde, but he could be a dark horse.
Yes, he certainly could, and I think there's a few riders there who are, just out of that favourite. Zabel, of course, he was very quiet in Torino, Adriatico, but I'm wondering, was he keeping, his powder dry, as they say, and not showing his hand, because, he's a very experienced rider, and as Freire said in the interview, he said, when you're a big favourite, there's a lot of pressure on, but he said it would be really worse if there were no pressure on, because then it means you're not in good shape and there's nobody talking about you. So what is best? But as I said, Zabel, very experienced. Bettini, of course, a lot of pressure off him as well, because he wasn't going well in the beginning of Torino, but he came very good in the end. I thought the last 2 or 3 days he looked impressive, and he's a one, if there's a lot of tax on the Poggio, I think he would be a guy who could move away out of break, because that would be his job within the quick step team, because Bona will be there for the sprint, and if it comes down to a sprint, it'll be all for Bona in the quick step team.
It certainly would be if it came to that, but there we see on the far side, or the left-hand side of our picture, you just got a little shot of Tom Boonen, number 212. There he is. He's in centre picture now. That's Tom Boonen, notable for winning the last stage of the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées. His second stage win in the Tour de France last year. Tom Boonen had a pretty good tour, finished very strong indeed, and well, he is amongst the favourites to win.
Yes, he is amongst the favourites. My concern would be the Paris-Nice that he had, the kilometres they done with the race being shortened on 3 days. He might be just a little bit short in the end on the kilometres, and it might catch him out on the suppressor Poggio. That is what would be my concern. The riders that did it Torino, of course, I think they had much better conditions, so it would look like they might be in a little bit better shape, and that would be an advantage for those riders.
Well, the pace is certainly being upped here. This is Cedric Vasseur, and I'm a bit surprised to see the Cofidis boys lining it out. We've seen one or two Cofidis jerseys on the front of the peloton in the last few kilometres, Sean. Why would Cofidis go and force the pace so early on? Obviously, they're riding for Stuart O'Grady, but they don't want to zonk him out too much, Stuart, because Stuart's still got to get over these last climbs as well, hasn't he?
Well, I think these climbs, Stuart O'Grady can get over them quite well. The big major climbs and the big tours, he has problems, but these I don't think to be any problem for him when he's in top shape. And it's surprising to see the Cofidis Vasseur riding there. We see Kurtz on the front pulling it along, and at this moment front been doing that because there's nothing up the road. I'm surprised, you know, that they're doing so much work on the front, so it must be to make the race difficult for the rest of the sprinters.
Well, they must think that Stuart's got good legs on him, and let's hope he has. Stuart, who's had so much success in recent years. He's won stage of the Tour de France. He's held the yellow jersey, as we see another attack by Tossato, but this is yet another team being represented here. And here we've got number 192 is Valerio Agnoli from the Naturino Sapore di Mare, one of the wild card teams in the race, Agnoli. And he'll be after a little bit of publicity for his team. Not one of the regular teams on the new Pro Tour, and they've been given a wild card here, not surprisingly. Most of the wild cards have gone to Italian teams, surprise, surprise, but we expect that, and it will happen in the big tours, I'm sure. Well, they've allowed Agnoli a little bit of a distance here on this climb, but I don't think that he can really have any great hopes of staying away to the finish. But this is a brave effort from the young man.
I think this effort here is just to get a little bit of TV time, because to get away here for a rider, it's an impossible task. And as we see it here, if they start riding in the bunch at all, he will be just swallowed up immediately. In the bunch, actually, they seem to be riding along at quite a casual pace. Nobody really opened the pace that much, and we see the group here very much together.
Did you see there was a little banner there for Celestino, Mirko Celestino, twice the winner of World Cup races. It's nice to see that banner, because I don't know whether you made a note, Sean, it's Celestino's 31st birthday today. So if you're one of those people who believes in birthday presents, then maybe the fans there think that it's going to be their man's day today.
Well, of course, as you said, Mike, he's won some World Cup races, so he's a rider, of that quality. The classic races, the big distance suits him. So, today's a race, as I said, on home ground. The Italians, it's really special for them today to win this race. They seem to ride that little better on this race because they have so much support, so much supporters behind them. So maybe we might see a bit more of Celestino.
Well, meantime, Agnoli's little effort has come to naught. He's only just 20, by the way, Agnoli. This is only his second year as a professional, but he got a little bit of publicity there for a moment or two, but that's come to naught, and he now is back in the confines of the peloton. Well, Celestino will be in there somewhere as well, I'm sure. Birthday presents are always nice in the form of race wins, aren't they? But I don't know whether he's quite got it for Milan-San Remo. He specialises in getting away in the closing stages, usually from a small group. That's how Celestino likes to win his races. He's not a pure sprinter at all, but he's very good at the solo attacks in the closing stages. A bit like Andrea Taffy in some ways. Taffy likes to do that sort of thing. And now we see a terrific speed on the descent from one of these little capos. The speed that these riders are doing down here is really phenomenal. Lining out. Unfortunately, dry conditions, no problems with the roads here today. It's been dry and fairly sunny, just a smattering of clouds here and there, but nothing to worry anybody, no signs of any rain. The temperature nice and warm, up around 20 Celsius, that's 68 Fahrenheit, isn't it? So a pretty good day all round, a slight tailwind, which means that the riders are going to be reaching the Via Roma in San Remo a little bit ahead of schedule. And we've got an attack here by the by the Ceramica boys, the Ceramica Panarias, winding it up. They've no huge names in their team. Sergei Matveyev from the Ukraine is a good strong rider.
As we see, 38 kilometres at the moment, so you know, they are going very, very fast. It's going to be a much earlier finish than when we had expected. And usually, in this race, the first 2 or 3 hours are quite slow. But today, you know, they were doing quite a nice average over the first 2 or 3 hours of the race.
Well, Gianni Bugno holds the record for the highest speed. When he won in 1990, the great Gianni Bugno actually averaged 45.806 kilometres an hour, which is around about 28 miles an hour for almost 300 kilometres, Sean. It's pretty good going, don't you think?
Yes, it was, and I remember that year, actually, I was in the PDM team. We missed that move. There was about certainly 40 riders went away very early in the race, and I remember I was, a bit further back, 3/4 ways back in the bunch, and it split and they went away, and there was a lot of teams, including the PDM team, right in the front, we just could not close it down because there was, a big group up front, and that day was a very, very fast day. I think maybe, as you said, probably maybe one of the fastest days of the race.
Well, that was the race record, 45.8. At the other extreme, and even before you and I were born, Sean, Eugène Christophe won the 4th edition of this race way back in 1910 with an average speed of 23.3 kilometres an hour, which is only, about barely 15 miles an hour, I think. And the weather was so bad that day. Just a little bit of history about Milan San Remo. In 1910, the weather was so bad, many riders climbed off when they went over the big climb way back, the Torcino, because it was covered in snow, and some of them literally had to push their bikes through the snow. And that year, they started with 71 riders in Milan, and only 4 made it to the finish in San Remo that year. Only 4. Eugène Christophe won by almost half an hour.
Amazing.
The good old days, they call them. Nearly 6.5 hours of racing, and they're not there yet. Well, there we see the peloton around one of the many roundabouts that they have to circumnavigate, and yet you can always tell just how high the speed is in any bike race by the way that they're strung out like that. When you see the peloton strung out in a long line, you know that the speed is very, very high. Well, they're not very far off the Cipresa now, which comes with around about 22k to go. Interestingly, Fassa Bortolo's on the front. Matteo Tossato, ever watchful there. He'll, of course, along with Fabio Baldato, he'll be one of the guys who will try to get the Fassa Bortolo train going for Alessandro Petacchi in the closing stages. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out. Just remember, there are 25 teams of 8 riders. Okay, 1 or 2 have started with fewer than 8, but most of the teams have got their full complement of 8 riders. It should have been 200 riders started, but due to 4 or 5 fallouts, we began this morning with 195, which is still a very, very big field indeed, of course. And there's Mario Cipollini just going through our picture, and Cipollini at the head of the peloton. Hey boys, come on, where are you? I'm here.
Yes, it's a surprise to see him up there.
Oh, crash! Well, now this was a crash at the front of the peloton, and that's bad news, because when it happens at the front of the peloton, everybody behind has got to ram the anchors on and get round.
Yes, we see one of the liquid gas riders on the ground there, actually.
Well, is that Bettini?
Yes.
I think it's the Italian jersey, so that's got to be Bettini. Well, that's bad news indeed, and that happened just at the wrong end of the peloton, as it were, right at the front of it. And so suddenly we've got absolute mayhem here. Number 177 there is Marco Milesi. That's one of the Liquigas riders, should say. And let's have another little look at that. Can we see just what happened there? I'm not sure whether we can. Well, in fact, it was in the middle of the peloton, not quite at the front. It was right in the middle. I missed the front part of the peloton on the original transmission going through our picture. It was just around about 20 or 30 riders back, and Bettini looks as though he is in a bad way there. Well, a touch of wheels, a lapse of concentration, Sean. It's Christian Moreni, they're saying now. We thought at first it was, no, now I get a closer look at the face, it's clearly not Bettini.
Yes, and we could see there that the road it tightened a bit. There were some parked cars, and it just got a little bit tight, and they seemed to get pushed together, and down they went. And it was quite close to the front in about 30-40 position in the bunch.
Well, so we now know that it's not Bettini who's gone down there. That is indeed Moreni. I should have known the Moreni, the Italian champion. And meantime, of course, the race goes on, and we're going back up to the front now. And those guys are just going to have to take their chance now. That's bike racing, but it's caused quite a split in the peloton, Sean, because when those guys went down, it almost blocked the road for the rest of the peloton behind them, didn't it? So there's a big split now.
Yes, it certainly did, and we see Mario Cipollini come to the front there, and he was making some hand signals, and that was saying that there had been a crash. He was just talking to the riders in the front, you know, not to, you know, to slow it maybe a bit. And as we see, Moreni is still, he's pretty injured actually. He's not getting up off the road at all.
Well, there's still quite a few riders who are not yet back on their bikes, and I can tell you that that rider there is Leif Hoster from the Discovery Channel. So Hoster is not going to be any help to Stein Tafolder, the young man who they've nominated as team leader in the absence of George Hincapie. Back to the head of the race now, and it's thinned out a little because they've lost quite a few riders who are now presumably forming a second peloton. And we might just pan back and see, there's one rider chasing, more riders chasing. There you see, there's the second peloton. All these guys got delayed by that crash, and they're now having to fight to get back on.
Yes, well, those riders got held up, but I don't think it's going to be a major problem for them. You know, they're going to come back now. It's not really going full bore out front, so you know, they're going to come back into this group at a good moment, and you know, they're not in the most critical time of the race. If it happened just before the suppressor, well, then it would be a much more difficult job. So luckily, at the time it happened, it's not really a critical moment of the race.
Well, they're certainly doing big licks to try and get back onto the front part of the peloton, Sean. And here we go back up to the head of the race. At least I think this is the head of the race rather than the chasing group. It does look more like the head of the race to me.
Yes, it's. I think it is ahead of the race, and it looks like the Illes Baleares team are rolling along on the front of this, the front part of the bunch.
Well, that's Alessandro Valverde's team, of course, and they'll be anxious to make sure that he is in with a shout, cover the finish on the Via Roma. Well, there you see the gap. It has tightened up a little already, and as you said, Sean, they're not going 100% at the front, otherwise you would see them lined out. 30 kilometres to go, that's about 18 miles in pound shillings and pence. Now remember that the Cipresa is at about 22 to go, so they've got another 8k or roughly 5 miles before they hit the Cipresa. And there we see once again the delay caused by that crash, which I'm sure must have been just a touch of wheels. It does happen, but it caused a huge delay right in the middle of the road, and therefore very, very difficult for everybody at the back end of the peloton to get themselves round the fallen riders. Back to the head of the race once again.
And the Rabobank's marching them back up, starting to wind it up. And of course now, as you said, Mike, you know, coming to the Cipresa, it's time for positioning now, because you have to be in a good position getting onto the bottom of this climb.
Has still got to be closed, and there you see it. It's probably around about 40 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, but it is coming down. It was reported to be almost a minute at one time, but as the camera pans back, There you see the chasers lined out, really going for it to try to get back with the head of the race. That's Carrasco from the ES Balears team, just going through our picture. He'll want to see where his teammate Valverde is. And he's really riding very strongly, and he's just gone past another of his teammates there. And that, I think, was Valverde we just saw. So at least he now knows where his team leader is. And he's in the back half of the field at the moment as they try to close down on the front part of the peloton, split by that crash. This is a race, Sean, which everybody wants to have on his CV, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. As I said, it's, you know, the first big one of the season, of course, means a lot. But it is one of the big monuments in the classics. You know, with the Paris-Roubaix and the Tour of Flanders, Liège-Bastogne-Liège is probably the four biggest, one of the four biggest of the early part of the season. And you know, we see in the bunch there, or the leading part of the bunch now is starting to, the pace is starting to hot up once again. You know, the teams from the big favourites, the Fassa Bortolas, the Rabobank, starting to ride in the front, and it's definitely not going to you know, help the group chasing there. It looked like they were going to get back, but the pace have been up a lot, so it might be a little bit more difficult for them to come back into the leading group now.
Well, this young man, Simone Massiarelli, is really going full bore, riding for Acque Saponi. Teammate of his from the Ukraine, Pospiev, who's a very powerful rider. And he's one who might fancy his chances in a lone bid over the climbs, if he can get over the climbs. And of course, Bo Hamburger also rides for them. And of course, he is another strong man. Well, it certainly is being spread out now. Gaps beginning to appear. Eric Decker lying third in the string there, I notice. Decker's a strong man. 4 stage wins in the Tour de France, 3 in 1 tour 2 or 3 years ago. And Decker would love to be on hand just in case Oscar Freire, his teammate, hasn't got the legs. I suspect Oscar Freire will have the legs like he had last year, but just in case, they've got it both ways, haven't they? Decker can go for the long one, Sean, or if it does come to a sprint, Freire is the man. So Rabobank really have got 2 cards to play here.
Yes, they certainly have. Of course, Decker, he's, you know, riding quite well. We see him in the recent Paris-Nice, you know, going quite well. And he's a rider, like, if there's groups going away, he's a rider that can be, you know, put up there from the Rabobank team. And of course, I think if they come to the Poggio altogether, I think Decker's job will be to start riding on the front to really make it difficult for Pataki and the other sprinters, because Freire, as we know, we see him last year in the World Championships, the way he was climbing in that race, and he can do that a bit better than the other sprinters. So I would see Decker doing a lot of work on the Poggio.
Centre picture there, Alexander Vinokurov, the Kazakhstani, who's had such a great career. Of course, there's another team with 2 strings to the bow, T-Mobile. They've got Zabel for the sprint, Vinokurov for the late lone break, so yet another team that can do it either way. How badly, Sean, do you think Eric Zabel will want to put right what went wrong last year, do you think?
Well, I think you know, he's, you know, definitely going to be out there today and try and you know, win it again. And we see him there. He's in the first 10 or 15 of that group on the climb here of this Cipressa at the moment. And as I said, I think he was, taking it a little bit easy. I think he was capable of doing better in the Torino Adriatico the past week, but I'd not be surprised if we see him, in the final again today, and maybe, who knows what he can do in the sprint after such a long distance. We know Zabel in the past years, he's not as fast as he was, but I think after such a long distance and, such a fast race in the end, and when you come over the Poggio with a number of kilometres to go, it's difficult to recover, and that's where he comes out on top. He can, produce a good sprint in those circumstances.
We shall see. Well, the attacks are beginning to come thick and fast yet now. We haven't yet quite got to the Cipresa climb. We're very, very close to it now as we look at the rider from the Ceramica Panaria team, one of the wild card entries, number 44, Luca Massanti, having a bit of a go off the front. He is the current race leader. No big names particularly in the Ceramica team these days. It's very much a workhorse team which enters mainly the Italian domestic races. You don't often see them riding in many of the big races, but of course this being Italy, then of course they will get the wild card. You just saw briefly the British Road Race Championship jersey, I spotted it there, of Roger Hammond, who of course is riding for the Discovery Channel, but don't look for him in a Discovery jersey. He's quite rightly got his British Champions jersey on, Roger, and he's not very far back. He got the contract after his brilliant third place in Paris-Roubaix last year behind Magnus Backstedt. Another Phonak rider coming out of the peloton. I'm not quite sure who that is. It might be Aurélien Clerc, the Swiss rider. But they're on him straight away, so he's not going to get any leeway at all. And from here on in, this race just goes up and down these little hills, never very far away from the Mediterranean Sea itself, only a matter of a few hundred meters away from the seashore, and yet here they're going up and down these little cocks in the closing stages. Valverde, there he is. He's looking quite relaxed at the moment. And, well, he just could be one of the dark horses of this race. We'll see. And there to the right, you see the Mediterranean, Francesco Casagrande, what a great name. Riding for one of the smaller teams these days, I'm afraid. Casagrande, he's probably nearer the end of his career than the beginning, that's fair to say, as Konischev and Taffy and indeed Cipollini are. Casagrande riding for the Naturino Sapore di Mare team from Italy, not surprisingly. It's an all-Italian team. He's got Gian Matteo Fanini with him and Filippo Simeoni. So he's in good company, good riders with pedigree. And here he is, forcing the pace on the front, Sean.
Yes, and he's a rider that can, do this sort of climb well. He's a very good climber. And he seemed to be, pulling it out quite a lot. They pulled out a nice little advantage there quite quickly. And we all know, over the years, he's a very good rider in the stage race, but also in the classic races, the hillier ones, and that's where he comes to the fore in those sort of climbs.
Well, he's proved himself in the Giro d'Italia, of course, hasn't he? And now we've got one of the ES Balears riders going away, I think. And these attacks are coming all the while now. Everybody wants his little moment of glory, and it's amazing, isn't it, as we see Terralongo from the Ceramica Panaria team going away. It's amazing that these guys have so much energy in their legs after such a long ride. They will not ride another day's racing as long as this from now till the end of the season. Oof, and that motorbike got pretty close there, but all is well. Well, the rider at the back there is Casagrande, who we saw leading before. He's managed to latch onto the wheel of the other SKP. So that's a nice little toe up for Casagrande as they go around. See how close the rider came there to the motorbike. The cameramen, they do a great job, and particularly the television cameramen, they do a fantastic job. But I have to say, there are times when I just hold my breath for a moment. They'd get a little bit too close, and that was just one of those incidents. Well, Casagrande, I must say, looking quite relaxed here. in the company of the Ceramica rider, Tirolongo. And they've managed to get the gap, but it's only a few seconds, and it won't be long before they're back together again. And then it'll be somebody else's turn, and then after that somebody else's turn, and that's what makes this race so unpredictable. Who's going to attack next? Can they stay together? Will it be a sprinter's finish?
And of course, a lot of the riders who don't like the descending will be, a bit concerned the descent of the climb, and they will be trying to go to the front and try to go away. And of course, Casagrande, maybe that was his tactic, just to be in the front and to do the descent of the suppress in the front of the group. A little bit out in front is the best way, as we see him trying to do there.
Well, this is the climb of the Cipresa that they're on now. This is one of the two named climbs. Of course, the Poggio is the last of those two, but there are one or two other little bits of ups and downs in between. But the Cipresa particularly has been known in the past for the start of the big sort-out. Valverde still going well. But look at this now. This is Sala of the Ceramica Panarea team, really letting fly. Well, the winners who have escaped on the Poggio in the last 20-odd years, and there you see Paolo Bettini did it in 2003, Laurent Jalabert back in 95, and a certain S. Kelly both in 86 and 92, Sean. You really were one for stirring it up a little bit, weren't you? And our mutual friend Laurent Fignon, twice a winner of the Tour de France, who of course now regularly commentates here on Eurosport alongside yourself, Sean. Laurent Fignon did it in 88, the great Francesco Moser in 84, Saroni in 83, and I think wasn't that the year that Saroni, or was it the previous year, of course, when Saroni was the world champion? So he was a world champion who won this race in a world champion's jersey, Saroni. I think that was he was the last person to do it, wasn't he? Actually win this race wearing a world champion's jersey. And if Freire does win, of course, he won't be wearing a world championship jersey. He's wearing the leadership jersey in the new Pro Tour. Well, here we go back to the head of affairs once again. 20 kilometres to go, and they're on the descent of the Cipresa now. In the closing stages of this race, it's quite a steep descent, but there's nasty twists and turns on it that you've got to watch out for. Now at the bottom, thankfully, it levels out for a little while. There's another couple of mini conks before they get to the Poggio, but we now have just 20k to go, and there you see, out on his own at the moment, that looks like Celestino. Now then, this is interesting. Celestino, it's his birthday. What was I saying earlier, Sean?
Well, Celestino, of course, he will know this descent very well. All the Italians will, know it like the back of their hands. And of course, if you know that well, you can really go down. And this is a dangerous descent. We have seen many crashes here, actually, on the descent of the Cipresa. More than the Poggio, we have seen a number of crashes over the years. And it's a descent where riders seem to get caught out on this descent. But if you know it very well, and as Celestino would know it, I think he's a good man to have on the front. And that's an important thing when you're in the race as well. You look at who's in front of you, and you always you say to yourself, is he a good descender? Does he know this descent? And if he's an Italian and you know the name and he's one of the favourites, well then you know that he's very aware of what the descent is like, so you follow that wheel.
Well, he's got three or four riders following him. There's at least a couple of Fassa Bortollos in the chase with him as we go back to the chase group following. But Celestino has pulled out around about 4 or 5 riders, I think it is. Well, we'll go back to the head of the race in a moment. Here we are. There's Celestino on the front. There's a Fassa Bortollo right behind him there, look, in second place. But as you say, he's using his local knowledge here very, very well. But even so, despite that, and those 4 or 5 leaders there, the peloton is still coming right back at them. The speed now on the descent of the Cipresa here, really phenomenal. And let's keep our fingers crossed that everybody gets down safely after what you just said, Sean, about crashes.
Yes, and we see there's the motorbike, we just see it here actually, is between the riders and it's caused a little bit of a problem for the fifth rider on the road. We see on the previous corner where he's having difficulties because the motor being up there, but of course the TV camera has to get the good shots, and they are allowed up there. The photographers, of course, they would all be moved out by this point by the race director because they're not allowed in the descent amongst the riders.
I'm just trying to establish the identity of the quick-step rider. I have a feeling that it could be Bettini. I've not seen his race number yet.
And that's Zabel there we see coming back, closing it down, and we see just behind Celestino actually there were two riders from the Faso team, and here we see Zabel once again closing the gap, and Tom Bonan of course there giving the handling just to close the final number of metres.
Well, that's nice to see. Friendship amongst rivals there, Bonan and Zabel, who may well be involved in the final denouement, and there they are giving each other handslings in the race. Well, back to Bettini. It is Bettini who's out in front with Celestino and that little group, which includes one or two of the Fassa Bortolo boys. So Bettini, of course, a possible winner here. He's done it before, and who knows, he might well be able to do it again. And there we see that little Tom Boone and Eric Zabel moment of friendship. It might not be quite so friendly on the finishing straight.
No, certainly not. But that's something that does happen when a rider does a long stint at the front. And Zabel was after making a long bit on the front on the descent, and you don't change there on the descents with the corners coming up so quickly. But immediately when they got on the flat road, he gave him the handling just to close that last 10 or 15 metres of a gap. And we see Bettini, of course, a dangerous moment when you get to the bottom of this descent of the Cipressa. We've seen occasions where there's a big group, 20, 30 riders, and they start looking at each other, and then there's a number of attacks and riders go away. And this is a time we have seen riders get away. Finian actually, on one of the years he won, he escaped just like this, as we see Bettini doing at the moment.
Well, Bettini is another of the late lone break specialists who loves this sort of thing, and of course he's a diminutive character, he's a good climber, and if he could get to the top clear, you never just know. Well, the Credit Agricole rider there looks like, I don't know, Koyo, beg your pardon, not Koyo, Kasheshkin, it could be, from Kazakhstan. Let's have a little check on that if we can with Bettini. I think we'll find that that's Kasheshkin for Credit Agricole. That's Tor Uzov's teammate, by the way, and we saw just how strong. We haven't talked about Tor Uzov. How strong was he in the finishes at the Tour de France last year, Sean? We saw him up there on a number of occasions going for the stage victories. Uzov could well be a surprise packet,
Yes, well, we did see Uzov, very strong in the finish last year. He was really on a good run during the Tour de France. I don't know if he's in that great shape at the moment, but certainly if it comes down to a sprint, he's always the one to reckon with. But I think the Poggio will be a little bit difficult for him unless he's in really good shape, which I doubt at this moment.
Well, that is definitely Kasheshkin who is up there with Bettini at the moment.
And there's Chippo we see on the right hand side of our screen, actually in about 20th position.
Well, this is a little bit of a flat stretch that they've got now for a few kilometres before they get to the Poggio. There's a few little blips in the road just before they get to the actual climb, nothing serious. One's called the Capo Verde, the Green Hill, and then of course there's the Poggio itself. But for the moment they're just on a little flat stretch, and these two, as you can see, have really got the bit well and truly between their teeth here and are going flat out. But behind them, look at the way that the peloton is strung out, and how many Fassa Bortolos are there, Sean, at the head of affairs? Look at this.
Yes, well, yeah, the entire team is almost there, and definitely they have it under control. When you see so many riders like that, it looks like that they have it really they're really controlling the race, as we see Oscar Freire here also in close contention.
And just to his right, Mario Cipollini in the liquid gas jersey, number 171.
132 Hondo.
Well, Danilo Hondo, of course, has had a good start to the season, hasn't he? Two very good wins.
Also in the sprint, rather that he could, do it here on this final run in the sprint.
Well, these two are still holding court out front and sharing the work between them. That's a good sign as well, that they're working together. Well, Bettini, of course, the only man to win the World Cup 3 times, and he did it in the last 3 years in succession before the World Cup metamorphosed into what we now call the Pro Tour. And of course he also won the Olympic gold medal in Athens last August with a wonderful victory, getting away and just out sprinting his breakaway companion. So a wonderful double for Bettini last season. Several of the Rabobanks at or near the head of affairs there. Oscar Freire and Eric Dekker, their two main men. There's Dekker in the red, white and blue. Dekker, of course, the reigning Dutch road race champion, hence the jersey. So on the left you've got the two breakaways, on the right you've got the chasing group, Rabobanks and Fassa Bortolo's, Holland and Italy doing their best to limit the damage here and try to get these two back. But as the camera pans up on the road on our right hand side of our screen, and there it is full screen now, you see that these two really have done considerable damage, and there they are as they get ever nearer to the last climb of the day over the Poggio. Now Kasheshkin is not a name that immediately springs to mind when you think of possible winners, but he is a Kazakhstani, and the Kazakhs have produced so many good riders in the last 10 or 15 years. Alexander Vinokurov for one, of course. We've seen a number of others over the recent years who've done ever so well. Is he going to be a surprise package, or is he just there to help Bettini on his way?
Well, they're definitely doing a very good job here, because we see the Faso team riders are, pulling along at a very strong pace, and as you said, Mike, they've pulled out a nice advantage here. And when we get on to the final climb of the Poggio, if there's a little bit of hesitation time where the riders start looking at each other and the Faso riders are starting to pay for their efforts on the flat, well, then these riders could pull out another number of seconds, and who knows what could happen. Maybe they could just hang on out there, as we see. Is it Anilis Balearis rider having problems?
I think it was, yes, Balearis. We'll maybe get another look at that. And here we see that's an action replay of them going around that corner. And I'm not quite sure what happened to him there, but anyway, back live now and back to our two leaders, Andrei Kasheshkin for the Credit Agricole in the green and white from Kazakhstan, and little Paolo Bettini, who really is showing the form which took him to victory in this race 2 years ago. Well, Bettini, of course, has had a fairly quiet start to the season by his own high standards. He didn't win anything in the Tour of Mallorca. He had a 7th on one stage, and he was in a top 10 a couple of times during Tirreno Adriatico. Nothing of any great indication to us that he was going to perform well here today, but perform well he certainly is, and he's also doing a great job for his team, because well, obviously if he stays clear he's got a great chance of winning the race, but if they should come back, then behind Tom Boonen, his teammate, has been sitting in the wheels while he's been out front, and Tom Boonen is getting the easier ride now.
Yes, he certainly is. It's a perfect situation for the quick steps with Bettini out front. Bone, he just have to follow the Fassa Bortolo train, and if Bettini stays out here and even is caught in the final kilometre, he's there to help Bone in the sprint, which is a great advantage. Where the Fassa riders are going to ride so hard now, will many of them stay right over the top of the Poggio, and how many will be there on the sprint to lead out Pataki? And that's the question, because when you come down to a sprint of 30-40 riders, sometimes if you haven't got enough men to lead it out, you can get boxed out on the sprint, and as we know here, if it's not pulled out the sprint really fast, that can happen very, very easily. Just a little bit more of Kasheshkin. He's only had 2 victories in his career. And they've not been notable victories either.
won the Saxon Tour and the Grand Prix des Fourmis last year, and that's it. 25 years of age, turned pro in 2001. So it's not a name you would immediately think of, but I'm sure that Paolo Bettini right now is very thankful for the company as they get ever nearer to the climb of the Poggio, which you know has been the staging post for so many of the solo wins that we've had in the history of this race, which, let me remind you once again, in case you just turned on, you missed it earlier, this race began in 1907. In another couple of years it will celebrate its centenary. Well, the gap's 23 seconds now, and this, I think, is where they start the climb of the Poggio. You should know this well enough, Sean. You've been there a few times.
Yes, they're certainly on the Poggio. They've been on it for a little while now. We see that when they came around the corner, when we see one of the Islas Baleares, as we thought, that was the beginning of the climb. So they're into it for, at least 2 kilometres, maybe a little bit more at the moment.
It's about a 4-kilometre climb. That's what, about 2.5 miles, and it's a real sting in the tail, isn't it, for these guys, some of whom very, very rarely race this kind of distance in their whole careers in one single day.
Yes, it's a climb which is, a quite short one, as I said earlier on, for those riders. It's only, 3.5 kilometres, a little bit less, I think, but it depends on what sort of speed you go up with that. And at the moment, we see the Fassa Bortolo riders were pulling quite a number of them, but they have disappeared, and we only see one in the front, our last shot there, and there was quite a few of the Rabobank riders coming to the fore, and I'd be not surprised if they really up the pace, because, they have the race winner in the team with Ferreira, and he can, climb very well, so it's in their interest to really make it difficult and try and get rid of the other good sprinters out of this leading group.
So why aren't we seeing the Rabobanks doing a little bit more of the effort? Are they just happy to let the Fassa Bortolo boys do it for them?
Yes, well, certainly until now they were. There was a few of the Fassas, but as I see the Fassas disappearing from the front, I think we could see the Rabos taking on.
It's a very, very precarious lead that these two have got, Sean. That I'm not even sure that they're going to stay away over the top of the climb. As the camera pans back, let's have a look. There you go. It's barely 10 seconds. Fassa on the front for sure. There's a CSC rider as well right up there.
And of course the second rider there is Kirchen, also from Fassa Bortolo, the champion of Luxembourg. So they still have the two riders on the front, and still working away and keeping the pace very, very high. But those two out front, they're also working quite strong. And as you said, will they stay out there? If they get over the top with 10 or 15 seconds, that's have been enough in some years, and the riders have won with that advantage going over the top. But it seems like the Fasso rider on the front was up in the pace a little bit more the last shot we see. Liberty Seguros go in the attack.
Well, that is Angel Vicioso, and Vicioso's got form, and Vicioso has quickly, would you believe it, just like that, Vicioso has gone up front to the two leaders, and he's gone straight past them. What about that, Sean?
Yes, he's really came out of the bunch very, very strong there, and went by the two leaders very, very quickly. And we see him there as he went to that corner again, not knowing the climb, I'd say that well. He went very wide in that corner, but definitely very, very impressive here at the moment, the way he went by the two leaders.
Well, this is Roberto Heras' teammate. Heras, twice the winner of the Tour of Spain, but Heras is not in the race today, so Vicioso presumably will be their team leader, I would have thought. He's not a pure sprinter, Vicioso, but he's gone away. And what are the Fassa Bortolo boys doing about that? There's a shot of Alessandro Patacchi, number 111, just going through your picture. They've got to do something quickly.
Yes, well, the Liberty Seguros team, of course, with Vicioso, he's riding very well, but also they have Alan Davis, who's, very fast in the sprint. So, he'd be the other car for the Liberty Seguros team, but definitely Vicioso, making a huge effort here and, creating quite an impact.
Creating an impact. You've chosen your words very, very well, Sean, because he's timed this well. And it was the way he went past the two leaders which impressed me greatly. He didn't quite make that corner the way he would have liked, but that was his enthusiasm, I think.
No, well, as I said a little bit earlier as well, in one of the corners, he took it very wide, and that, tells you that he doesn't know the climb that well, because if he was, if he had studied the climb and had made it on a few occasions, he would take his line that little bit better. As we see one of the Panario guys coming across very, very strongly.
Well, this is Tirolongo again. Tirolongo had a little bit of a dig earlier on, if you remember, around about the Cipressa area. But here he is once again, and it looks like Tirolongo is going to join up with Vicioso. And there it is, the join is made, but it's all going to come to nothing. 7 kilometres to go, and they're virtually all back together again. What can these teams who don't have sprinters do to make this race break apart? It's not that they haven't tried, Sean.
Vinokurov. And as I said, he's the man. If he's got the legs on the Poggio and he goes in the attack and he just pulls out a number of seconds before they start the descent, a very, very dangerous one.
Yeah, but he telegraphed that move a little bit, didn't he? And they were on him very, very quickly.
Yes, certainly did, because he attacked off the front of the group with everybody in his wheel, and it's not the perfect way to go about attacking, as we see Rebellin having a go here at the moment.
Well, David Rebellin has been a #1 in the world on the rankings in the past. Very consistent winner throughout his career. Good climber. They're not very far from the top of the Poggio now, almost at the top. And then, of course, it's that tricky little descent down towards San Remo. It's only it's a bit less than 6 kilometres to the finish when they get to the top of the Poggio. Very, very close to the finish, and most of that, almost all of it, is downhill. Celestino out near the head of affairs once again. Remember, he was second a couple of years ago, Celestino. So he must fancy his chances. Birthdays can sometimes inspire people. I know it's a silly thing, but quite often you just feel good on your birthday and you go and do something. So who knows?
And also we see Van Summeren from the David Tamalotto there, also in the wheel of Celestino. And this is the start of the descent. First corner with 5 leaders.
Well, they've done all the climbing that they've got to do today, apart from climbing onto the Victory Rostrum.
Yes, and that group going over the top now, just 4, 5, 6 seconds on advantage. Difficult for them to stay away with this group breathing down their necks.
Yes, it's barely 5 seconds.
Cipollini also here.
Well, he's managed the climbs well. Who knows if the old man can do it again. Tell you what, if he does win, he'll think that the rest of the season by the seaside in Lombardy wouldn't be so bad.
Well, certainly if he wins this one, he will be, who knows, if he can win this one, maybe we'll see a lot more of him during the season, because, his morale, he will be built up again in Italy. He will be, made the god once again, and maybe we'll see some more victories from him. We've often seen that happen in the end of some of the riders' careers.
Well, here's this little group of 6, and they've only got about 4 or 5 seconds. Celestino is still leading them.
From Rebellin.
I think, yeah, Rebellin in second place. And these twists and turns, they are so dangerous when you're doing them at high speed in the closing stages of one of the biggest bike races of any road race season.
And Pellizotti is also there from Liquigas. Kirchen from Faso. As we see, the group is getting closer and closer. It's only 2-3 seconds at the moment, and I think we're going to see it all coming together when we get to the bottom of the centre of the Poggio, and it looks very, very much we're going to see a bunch sprint once again. It looks like Valverde there at the rear of this group.
Well, Valverde is still in with a shout, in my opinion, Sean, because I'm sure that those leaders are going to get caught in the closing stages. We talked about him a little bit earlier, being one of the dark horses in this race. I haven't seen anything at all, by the way, of Fred Rodriguez, who, of course, has been second in this. Former American champion, Fred, and he could be there somewhere, there or thereabouts. Seen nothing of him throughout the race. Haven't mentioned him until now. I just thought that maybe he's been on the podium once before. 3K to go, that's all, and still a little bit more downhill to do yet. Still Celestino forcing the pace, but when we close in on them, we find that that looks like Pellizotti, actually. It is indeed, who's at the front of this little five-man group. But the main thing is that the gap between these leaders and the rest is virtually nothing at all. There they go, all the chasers behind them as they come down off the Poggio, and now to the final run-in to the Via Roma in San Remo, and the chance for glory. But they're all back again. But have the Fassa boys got time, Sean, to organise their train? Look, there's still a little gap here.
Yes, I think they have, you know, there's riders. We see a number of riders there starting to pull up the chase, and it's just going to be closed down now as we come to the final kilometre. And we see the rider we talked about earlier on from the credit I recall, Hushoff, he's also there at the moment.
Well, I just thought that Torozov just might be the one for a long, strong sprint. He is strong on the left of the picture, but the Fassas are beginning to get their men up there a little bit more now as we get nearer. Zabala for the Sonia Duval in the yellow in the middle of the picture there, but there's 1, 2, I can see 3 or 4 Fassa Bortolo jerseys. I'm just looking for the Rabobanks to give Oscar Freire the lead out. Where's Eric Decker? You thought that he might be one of the men to try and get Oscar Freire up there into a race-winning position. Zabel's got a couple of his teammates up there as they've been on the road for 7 hours and 10 minutes and 10 seconds, and going for glory here is Laurent Brochard, the former world champion for the Bouygues Telecom, formerly Brioche La Boulangère. Brochard, another of the senior citizens, so to speak, in the peloton, as they go under the red kite with 1,000 meters to go onto the Via Roma at the closing of this 96th Milan-San Remo. Have the Fassa Bortolo boys got their plan worked out, or have they left it a little bit late, and is it going to be a surprise packet from one of the other teams? The Fassas seem to have got their act together. Is it going to be Petacchi?
It looks very much like so. The Fassos are doing a magnificent job here, and Oscar Freire, we haven't actually seen him in our shot in the past number of kilometres.
Well, Freire, I think, is in 4th spot, actually, yes, Sean. Yes. There's the white jersey. Freire is there, and it's where he likes to be. The Fassa Bortolo boys are trying to wind it up, but so too is Bettini for his team, the Quick Step boys. And where's Tom Boonen behind him? He wants Tom Boonen to be there. I'm looking for Boonen. I'm looking for Petacchi as they come into the home straight. And where's Freire? This is going to be a photo finish, but Petacchi on the right-hand side of the picture. And this looks like Petacchi is going to make it with some ease.
Yes. Very, very impressive the way he won it there. And we see Ferreira, actually, he was up there, but he got closed out in the final 150, 200 metres.
Well, Pataki and his teammates just got it together with less than 2k to go. At one stage, it looked as if they'd not got their act together, but they did. And despite the efforts of Oscar Freire, who, of course, we've seen, ask an example, we've seen he's so good at coming in the late stages. We thought that Freire might make a late charge for the line, but he couldn't get better than second place. I think you'll find on the replay that Freire has finished runner-up. But Alessandro Pataki has done what he wanted to do, and the Italian Tifosi will consider him the next best thing to God. He will be worshipped for a long, long time now that he's won the race that they consider their greatest one-day classic. I know there's the Tour of Lombardy, of course, in the closing stages of the season, but Milan-San Remo is the one they all want on their CV. It's win number 12 for Alessandro Pataki, who's won so many stages of the major tours in the last couple of years or so. But this was the one-day race which this great sprinter wanted. Today, he got it. Well, the press besieging him, and of course, one of the little prices you have to pay for being a great bike rider is you have to fend off the press as you've been fending off your rivals on the bike. And there you see the race for the line with, well, Freire getting just slightly boxed in, if anything, and Pataki just miles away from everybody else. Just look at the margin he's got. That's not a photo finish.
Honda second.
Danilo Hondo in second, not Freire. And Freire didn't even get the second place when we see the overhead. It looked like Usoft.
Yes, Hushoff third, Hondo second. But surprisingly, we could see Oscar Freire there, and he got closed out with 200 metres to go. Surprisingly, he had no teammates around him to lead him out, and that is the problem here when it gets grouped together, as we see there when they came around the last corner. If you haven't got a good lead out, you can very easily get closed out in the sprint, and certainly for Freire, that was the case.
So another new name gets written into the annals of the history of Milan-San Remo, as you see Pataki with time to look back, room to spare, and really there was just nobody in the same class. He made it look so easy in the end. Danilo Hondo with 2 wins to his credit already this season, couldn't get there. Usoft, such a strong man in the sprint finishes in the Tour de France last year, he couldn't quite get there. Oscar Freire just slightly impeded with around about 200 metres to go, didn't have a totally clear run. Probably 4th or maybe even 5th in the final standings, Oscar Freire.
No, I think a little bit further back actually. It looked like we see a Francaise Jeu. It could be Eisel, or looked like Eisel. O'Grady seemed to be in the top 6.
Well, the Via Roma, a happy hunting ground for the Italians, of course. This is their 49th victory in this, their very own great race, one of the great monuments of pro cycling. And surely this man had to add it to his CV sooner or later. And today, Alessandro Pataki has done exactly that. Well, the name Pataki will be reverberating around the bars and taverns in San Remo, and in fact probably pretty well all over Italy this evening, I imagine, Sean.
Yes, it certainly will, and not only for this evening, I think for many days to come and many weeks to come, because an Italian winning the Milan-San Remo, it's, you know, it's just a magnificent, and if you win nothing else for the rest of the season, your year is made.
He's not finished yet, that's for sure.
No, certainly not. We've seen him over the past years, you know, the qualities he has in the sprint, and what a sprint from there today. He was looking around with 30, 40 metres to go, and there was nobody able to contest against him.
Well, it was almost as if he was saying, where are you guys, where are you, as he was looking round. Celebrated his 31st birthday back in January of this year. And 12 wins puts him well clear in the stakes for the most successful rider of the 2005 season, which has barely begun, really. Here we are, we're only in the middle of March. We've got such a long way to go. The Pro Tour, of course, goes right through to the Tour of Lombardy in October. 27 races in all now, this new streamlined successor to the World Cup. And there we see the lead out. And Danilo Hondo in third place there, you see, and as they go round into the home straight, Freire at that point, look, Freire right there, and he just got a little bit of a touch of the shoulder, yes, but it seemed to put him off momentarily, and from there Freire was always going backwards. Uzoft coming in his champion's jersey on the right in the red and white, but he couldn't quite get second place. And Hondo, who's had 2 wins already this season, Hondo in second place, but Pataki, well, he was just in a different class. There's the gap, and it was a big gap too. Looking back, saying, where are you guys? And once he winds up that big gear, he's probably got a 53.11 on, and rattling it round, then he is just superb, isn't he?
Yes, he certainly is, and the team are superb. You know, they did so much work there leading to the Cipressa, and then on the Poggio, between Cipressa and Poggio, of course, when we had Bettini away, they worked very well, and also on the Poggio they did a great job, and we see it there again in the sprint, a number of them with them just in the final. So, you know, a great job by the team certainly, but a magnificent sprint also by Pataki.
San Remo, the destination of this race ever since 1907. It was a very classy resort between the two wars, although it's fallen slightly out of favour in more recent years to its neighbour Nice, just down the road, although looking at all those yachts there in the marina, you wouldn't think so. Here's a little known fact for you. One of my favourite classical composers, Tchaikovsky, the Russian, he lived here in the 1870s, and he actually wrote his 4th symphony right here in San Remo, and also completed that wonderful piece, Eugene Onegin, whilst he was living in San Remo. And if he were alive now, perhaps he'd write a nice piece of music to celebrate this latest win of the Italian favourite Alessandro Pataki. Well, how many more wins, how many more times are we going to see that this season? How many more times are we going to see her this season? I do not know. No doubt waiting for Alessandro to get up onto the podium for the usual presentations, as we see another overview of this lovely Mediterranean resort. Well, just a reminder that Alessandro Pataki has won the 2005 edition, the 96th edition of Milan San Remo, from Danilo Hondo and Tor Uzoft. Well, there we see the little shoulder-to-shoulder from Hondo and Freire. It seemed to put Freire off a little. Hondo's teammate it was, actually, who then went backwards. And Alessandro Pataki dominant at the finish. It was set up for him, and he did the business. So a win number 12 for Alessandro Pataki. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of him in subsequent cycling here on Eurosport, as we have a little look at the official top 10 here in San Remo. A great day for the Italians and a great day for Alessandro Pataki. Well, that's it from San Remo. Just a reminder that my colleague David Harmon will be here with you, and the Criterium International next weekend. For the moment, goodbye.